the time has come to talk about all the books I read in 2022. I didn't read a lot. And by a lot, I mean if you go to all the other videos of booktubers talking about all the books they read in 2022, I didn't read a lot. But if you talk to some normal people, I read an insane amount. I read 29 books, give or take, in 2022. And I say give or take because I have a writing journal, or a reading journal, where I tried to put all of the books that I read with a few quick reviews and some of my favorite quotes. Halfway through though, I stopped writing reviews. As you can see, I got some pretty things going on here. And then suddenly, after like July, I just left blank pages and I didn't write reviews, and I also sometimes forgot to just put the book title that I read and when I finished it. So just before filming, I really scratched my brain to try and figure out how many books and what books I read. So let's go in order with what I do have written down. The first book that I read in 2022 was Honeybee. I read a lot of poetry collections this year. I started off with a poetry collection, and I am pretty sure I ended with one. If not, at least one of my last handful was a poetry collection. But I read Honeybee by Tristan Mattier. I originally gave this 5 out of 5 stars. I think I lowered it to maybe 4 or 3.5 stars out of 5. When I first read it, it made me cry. I have a lot of things that I liked. I do recommend this book if you're going through a heartbreak, or if you just want something to kind of get you into poetry that isn't too deep, but is deep enough to where you can kind of appreciate the experience and the wanting to read more deep poetry, if that makes any sense. But that is the first book I read. Moving on to the second book that I read in 2022 was a young adult novel, Imagine Me. This is the last book of the Shadow Me series. I'm pretty sure that I went over these books in my mid-year recap of books that I read, but I read the very last book of the Shadow Me series. I loved it. I want to do a reread of the entire series because it just didn't hit me the way I wanted it to, mostly because I was kind of disconnected from how much time had passed between each book and that I was reading. I'd forgotten a lot of things, so a lot of characters died, and I was like, oh, I feel like I should be sad, but I don't remember who these characters are, so I'm not sad. So I need to do a reread. But I highly recommend the Shadow Me series. Great young adult novel, or series. Good book. 5 out of 5 stars. In February, I read one book, and that was The Bitter End. The Bitter End is a poetry collection that I didn't bring out with me, unfortunately. It's by Kayleigh Faye, a good friend of mine. She wrote about heartbreak, and my favorite line is kind of where she talks about it's sad because their name tasted the best on their tongue, and it's sad because they didn't have a chance. The whole world was against them and it wasn't fair. That's me paraphrasing because I forget the poem and I forgot to bring the book out to read to you how good of a book that was. I gave it 3 stars because it wasn't my favorite, but I did very much enjoy a couple lines. In April, I read another one book, and that was Coffee Days, Whiskey Nights by Parker Lee. I just got an email in their newsletter that they will be doing a second printing of this, and they will have their name changed. And I'm really excited to get that new cover where it will say Parker Lee and not Cyrus Parker, and donate it to my library because I have a copy already and I don't need another copy. But I know my library could use some better selection of books. But Coffee Day, Whiskey Nights, I gave, I think, 3 stars. Yes, I gave 3 stars. It wasn't my favorite collection. I did like the way it was set up with some lighter poems being on the lighter pages and some darker poems being on the darker pages. And I love the little detail of a moon and what I'm assuming is the sun or sun rays in the bottom corner. Again, not really my favorite, but it was a nice collection to read. Next book, probably more poetry. I do want to warn you that I did read a lot of poetry this year, and I probably will continue to read a lot of poetry. Feel free to click out now if you don't want to read my reviews or listen to my reviews. The next book I read was Pangea. Pangea got 4 stars from me. No, it got 3 stars from me. Looks like this, a beautiful cover. I was really excited to dive into this collection because I saw the author posting poems on her Instagram, and it was really pretty. The problem is, after the first 30-ish pages, I kind of lost connect with the poems, and they didn't hit me the same way. I do want to reread it and see if that changes, but I do highly recommend this book. It's great. The next book was The Surrender Theory by Caitlin Conlon, who I'm also very happy to have gotten. This 5 out of 5 stars. I love this collection, which is no surprise. I love Caitlin's work. I've loved her work since her chapbook Cavity came out, and I've been following her for a long time. I know there's a line in here that was like, isn't the real loss not mourning you, but mourning the loss? And I think in that poem, it really hit hard. A lot of these poems hit very hard. But I do really recommend this collection. Pangea and The Surrender Theory, but The Surrender Theory more in particular, has longer poems, whereas Coffee Days, Whiskey Nights, and actually Honeybee, not that much. But Coffee Days, Whiskey Nights is more on the shorter stanzas. So keep that in mind. If you like shorter poetry, you might want to read Coffee Days. If you like longer, what I feel is like in more depth poetry, I would recommend Caitlin's work. But yes, 5 out of 5 stars for her. The next book that I read, I gave 3 out of 5 stars, and that is Aphrodite Made Me Do It. Very big contrast in Trista's latest work compared to her oldest work, Honeybee. I did not like Aphrodite Made Me Do It. Very short pieces. It felt like she was trying to fit into this box of Instagram poetry, and it just wasn't really my vibe. Which is unfortunate because I was really excited to read more of Trista's work because I was a big fan in Honeybee. But, sometimes things are hit and miss. The collages in here, though, are really beautiful, and I think that saved the collection from getting 2.5 stars out of 5. But another short read. Let's see. Sorry, I'm trying to speed through these. I got 29 to get through, and I know these first few I've already talked about. The next one that I gave 3 stars out of 5 is Trick Me or Your Computer Screen. I love the concept and the idea behind this collection. The formatting was very playful and experimental, but none of the poems I really connected with. I might actually be donating this to my library because it just really didn't sit with me the way I wished it would. But if you are a fan of experimental and kind of like haunting in a sense of trauma and mental health kind of poetry, this will probably be a good collection for you. But again, not really my thing. Pieces are long, very, interesting. I mean, the formatting is so playful and experimental, and it really helps build the pieces, but just wasn't kind of my vibe. The second novel that I read in 2022 was called The One and the Other. This is also by a dear friend of mine. Rachel's a friend. They blurbed, I think he blurbed my book Girl. And Charlie runs a magazine that I was so grateful to be published in this year. But The One and the Other is a queer book about vampires, and the main characters are Ace, and it made my little Ace heart happy. And it's a cute novella. I really recommend it if you like vampires and post-apocalyptic, but not too post-apocalyptic, if that makes any sense. So it's like post-apocalyptic, things crumbled, but it's not right in that setting of things being demolished. It's the aftermath of it, so things are already like rebuilt and reestablished. So if you love vampires and you love queer love and you love crying, I recommend this. 5 out of 5 stars. The other poetry collection that I read is Plums and Arpeggio. I still have no idea how to pronounce the title. 5 out of 5 stars. The writing is phenomenal. The only like cons I have is the fact that the main character's relationships with, you know, her love interests within this are so toxic and very predatory, actually. And it's like so tragic to read how they kind of took advantage of her, and the way that she doesn't see anything wrong with that. So I do want to, you know, note that in case that is a trigger for you. But if you're okay with that, I do really recommend this collection. It reads almost like a novel in verse because of the way the poems really connect, like one after the other. It felt very much like I was reading a story, whereas with the other poetry collections, kind of have the same theme, but not quite read like a story. Recommend this one, and they're good. 5 out of 5 stars. It reads. Let's see, in July, I finally finished On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, and I did not bring that book out with me. Ocean Vuong has my whole heart. I am so mad that I never knew of him before. On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, 10 out of 5 stars. I would give it 1,000,000 stars if I could. I am just so speechless with the way he writes. If you have yet to read Ocean's work, I highly recommend On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous. That is his autobiographical type thing, but it's very prosy. So if you're not like into poetry, but you like the poetry type language, I recommend that. If you're into poetry, it's a good read, but you could also pick up his other books. I just picked up On Night Sky and Exit Wounds, and I'm really excited to read that this year. But this book, phenomenal. I do have some lines highlighted that I'm going to read. You need to read the whole poem, though, because just the snippets does not do the book justice or the poem's justice. But one of my favorite lines is, "Our mother tongue, then, is no mother at all, but an orphan." And then some more. Sometimes being offered tenderness feels like the very proof that you've been ruined. And then, like I said, you need to read the poems for the context, but I have Trevor Was. If you read Ocean Vuong's On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, please leave in the comments how devastated you were over Trevor, because I cried. I did. And then the last one is, to be seen allows you to be hunted. Just a phenomenal collection work of art. It needs to be in a museum. I will never shut up about it. The next books that I read, I did videos on as well. If you haven't seen it, check out my series, The Book versus the Movie. I read The Great Gatsby and A Wrinkle in Time. Both books that I read before. This book is good for head empty, good vibes, you know. This one, good for nostalgia. I just want a child story, you know, that has a little bit of science in that, to be honest, I don't understand. I don't understand what a tesseract is, but I tried. The next few I borrowed from my library. I finally read Milk and Honey by Ruby Carr. Did not like it. 2 stars, maybe. Her writing is not for me at all. I feel like it lacked a lot of everything. Some of them were good, and it's kind of a shame because I know her poetry dealt with some very heavy topics, and I feel like it could have been done better, but to each their own. I don't want to bash it too much because my taste isn't the taste everyone should have, and I don't want to make you feel bad if you liked it. Just know that this is a Ruby Carr hate account, but hate as in very lightly hate, because thanks Ruby for, you know, bringing just... And the next one I read was Milk and Money, which is the parody for Milk and Honey. It was okay. I would not give it 5 out of 5 stars. For a coffee table book that, you know, you just set out in case you have, like, family over, Sure, 5 out of 5 stars. For a book that I would read again that was like, wow, this is phenomenal poetry, 2 stars. It was, again, just for the humor, and it did make me laugh for a few pages. So there's that. The other book that I borrowed from my library was Blue Horses. I know I did video on this before, but I didn't really care for Blue Horses. Some of the pieces were nice, some of the inspiration was good, but overall, might not be a collection that I would read again. Is it one that I would like to have on my shelf for the inspiration and to kind of study? Yes, but not for my own pleasure. The last book that I borrowed from my library was Still I Rise. Same as Blue Horses, not really my cup of tea, but it was okay. It was good. I liked a few pieces. Another poetry book, like I said, this was for Poetry Month, so, I don't know what this was for. I think it was for Poetry Month, but I was reading a lot of poetry. Into the Orange Grove. 3 stars, maybe? 2 stars, maybe? I didn't really like it. Couldn't connect with the poems. I felt more confused, and like the language was trying too hard to be, special rather than clear, so it felt more abstract, which is kind of sad, but it was an okay book. The next one was by Catherine. Catherine is also a good friend of mine, and I highly recommend all of her work because she's a phenomenal writer, especially when it comes to heartbreak. Sometimes I fall asleep thinking about you. Really good. I don't think I cried, but I know I came close because this book really hit me in the feels. 5 out of 5 stars for her. Violet Bent Over the Grass, or Backwards Over the Grass, I listened to an audiobook by Lana Del Rey. It was good. I kind of want a copy of my own, I think. But also because I listened to it as an audiobook, it had music in the background, which was both a pro and a con, because the pro, it was like set the vibes nicely, but sometimes it was a little too loud and it didn't mix. But I'd give that 4 out of 5 stars. The other audiobook I listened to was Changing with the Tides by Shelby Lee. Good if you like mental health poetry, good if you like positive affirmations and positive poetry. Not really my cup of tea, so I probably would not read it again, and I kind of give it 3 stars, I think. But again, what I like is not what others like, and that's okay. Another novel that I read was Darkness Falls. This is another indie book. The world is ending, and I cried, and there's like very little romance, which I love because some young adult borders on new adult, and I don't want new adult, so I'm very happy with this book. I give it 4 stars out of 5, I think. I recommend it if you like apocalypse set in Pennsylvania, which is my home state. Next book I read. These I am also going to do a quick run through because I'm doing a book talk video for them. 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I bawled my eyes out. I will continue to bawl my eyes out. This was the queer book I didn't know I needed. I loved it. So I thought I knew it was happening, and then boom, I didn't know it was happening. And I love it. And I really want to see a movie with it because recommend. Read it. Next one. Night Strider. Another indie book. I have a lot of indie books. Support your indie authors and indie bookstores. Night Strider is a fantasy book. The back says a winged assassin born of a nightmare, a gentle prince with split loyalties, a waver queen with a dangerous mission, a rogue nightmare with a haunted past, 2 worlds on the brink of unraveling. It's Pan's Labyrinth meets Throne of Glass. I haven't read Pan's Labyrinth or Throne of Glass, so I really have no idea if that's true or not. 4.5 stars out of 5. I liked the story. I only really liked Isla. She's one of the characters. Everyone else, I was kind of like, eh. The chemistry seemed forced, and one of the makeout scenes did not feel anything. It felt out of place and meh, but good. It's got some queer characters, so highly recommend. The next book that I read was Light Work. A lot of controversy around this book, and I will talk about it more in my book talk video. But 5 out of 5 stars. 5 out of 5 stars. Call me Heart Eater, please. I loved this book. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say. Watch my book talk video if you want to know more. I do have cons on the book, so don't worry. I will get into the controversy with that book. Alex Astor, I don't know why I call her Alistair. You're not out of it yet. I do have some words to say. On Sun Swallowing, another poetry collection. This is the last poetry collection I read this year by Dakota Warren, another booktuber, a really good one. I highly recommend you check her out. 3 stars. I think the vibes were there, but they weren't really my vibes. Does that make sense? Like, it felt like she was trying to fit herself into a box. The poems kind of felt repetitive, and I don't know. Like, I like the idea and the vibes, but it didn't hit me the way I wanted it to. But I do very much like the cover, so I think it gets an extra half star for that. So what did I say it was, like 4? I don't know, 4 to 5 stars, how's that? My did not finish book, The Lesson Before Dying. I can't get through this book. The writing is so bland and stale, and the main character is a pain in my ass. He is so incredibly rude, and just... this is a... What was this? Winner of the National Book Critics Circle Award for Fiction. I don't know what that means because it sucks, but I want to read it so I can give a full complaint and rant about it. But it's taking me months, and it's torture reading this. You know what else was torture? It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. That is another book I tried to read this year and could not finish. Did not finish. Really? Lily Blossom Bloom owns a flower shop? You could not. I've never read something more embarrassing in my life, if I'm being honest with you. Bad book, 2 stars. Don't recommend anything by Colleen Hoover. I also couldn't finish it, one, because I was uninterested. The writing was kind of but it went from being okay to straight up triggering. I could not sleep. Every time I read a chapter of the book, I would be up just with panic attacks. So it's not a book to be read if you are unwell with abusive relationships. So please keep that in mind when you read anything by Colleen Hoover. That seems to be her theme. Just keep that in mind, please. Mental health. Your health comes first before any book. The last book that I read was Portrait of Dorian Gray. I loved the Portrait of Dorian Gray. It was my absolute favorite. Plot twist of all plot twists. I made my Christmas gift list to get another copy of that book because I wanted its own. Like, because the copy has this collection with some others, and I just wanted full-on picture of Dorian Gray because the one classic I would recommend is the Picture of Dorian Gray, or the Portrait of Dorian Gray, because it's just so good. And I think there's a movie out, and I kind of want to keep the book versus the movie as a series, so I might watch it and might get some more thoughts. The last book I'm going to talk about is The Goldfinch. I kind of read it. I did not get through it. It's a thick book, but I felt like it needed to be mentioned because it's good. Though there's slurs mentioned in it, and I don't like that. It's kind of an interesting choice, but whatever. Those are the books that I read in 2022. This is a long video, I know, and I talk way too fast, so if you missed something, I'm sorry. I guess you just have to read the book and, piece it together. If you have read any of these books, let me know. I love reading other people's opinions because sometimes I will be a little bit swayed by other people's opinions. And like with Sun Swallowing, I was like, you know, it's good, it's not the best. And then I read some reviews, and some people were like, it felt like, you know, some things are overused or overdone or repetitive. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly how I felt. I just didn't know how to put it into words. You know what I mean? So I love people's opinions. Please share your opinions with me. And I will see you in the next video. I hope you love Book Talk recommended books, because we are about to get into them. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!